I am welcoming you to our event tonight, which is Together for Our Planet, How Faith Communities Can Engage with COP26. And we are holding this event in partnership to Interfaith Scotland. So I'm delighted to welcome you here tonight. Thank you very much for being with us and for gathering for this critical issue that the climate emergency is. I'm now going to hand you over to Rose Drew, our CEO at Interfaith Glasgow, for some words of welcome and introduction. So over to you, Rose. Thank you.
Thank you, Satya. Hello, everyone. As Satya said, my name is Rose Drew. I'm CEO of Interfaith Glasgow. A very warm welcome to all of you this evening. Thank you so much for making the effort to be here. Currently, all our events and activities are online, a tremendous advantage of which is the ability to engage with new audiences from far and wide. So wherever you're joining us from this evening, and especially if this is the first Interfaith event that you've ever been to, you are most welcome. This evening's event, as Satya mentioned, has been organised in partnership between Interfaith Glasgow and Interfaith Scotland. Interfaith Glasgow promotes and facilitates friendship building, dialogue and cooperation between people from diverse religion and belief backgrounds, primarily in Glasgow, though online working has made geographical boundaries seem rather arbitrary. And Interfaith Scotland promotes good interfaith relations throughout Scotland and works to share good practice in interfaith dialogue, education, engagement and training, both nationally and internationally. So a very warm welcome to all of you on behalf of both organisations. It's really, really heartening to see so many of you here this evening and confirms not only that there's widespread concern across faith communities about the deepening climate crisis, but also our sense that there will be strong interfaith engagement with COP26 when it comes to Glasgow in November, which is a great source of hope with respect to what is arguably the most urgent issue of our time, perhaps the most urgent issue of any time. In the last few years, the scale and urgency of the climate crisis has become undeniably clear. The staggering loss of biodiversity, relentless deforestation, seas full of plastic, and global carbon emissions that continue to rise despite scientific predictions of irreversible catastrophe if we do not reduce our emissions by at least 50% within the next decade. There's no denying that it's a grim picture, but there is hope. And a good deal of that hope comes from the enormous potential for people of diverse faiths and beliefs to work together to demand change and to help facilitate that change. Faith communities have particular resources to bring to bear with respect to the climate crisis, in both spiritual and practical terms. Religious narratives can articulate compellingly why we should care about the climate crisis, the human vices that have contributed to it, and the spiritual transformation necessary to overcome those vices. And at the same time, faith traditions have the power to motivate and mobilize large social networks, and therefore in working together to create a powerful campaigning voice and bring about effective joined up social action. For those of us in Scotland, there may be no better focus for our interfaith efforts than the next major UN climate summit, COP26, which comes to Glasgow in November. COP26 has been described as our last best chance. If there were ever a bandwagon worth jumping on, this is it. Interfaith Glasgow and Interfaith Scotland have already been doing a lot of work in this area, and through the COP26 Interfaith Working Group, which Interfaith Glasgow is Secretariat for and Interfaith Scotland chairs, we'll be seeking to ensure that there are plenty of opportunities for engagement, both in the run-up to the COP and during it. Scottish Interfaith Week has been moved this year to coincide with COP26 and will share its theme, Together for Our Planet, so as to encourage as much participation from diverse faith and belief communities on this issue as possible. So do get the dates in your diaries. Scottish Interfaith Week, 31st of October to the 7th of November. Interfaith Glasgow, Interfaith Scotland and other interfaith organisations and groups across Scotland will be running programmes of climate-themed activities, whether online or in person, as well as encouraging faith communities and community groups to run their own events and activities and to advertise them as both part of Scottish Interfaith Week and as part of the broad civil society climate fringe. There'll be tons going on, so please do get involved in as much as you're able to. Interfaith Glasgow and Interfaith Scotland are currently working together on plans to launch Scottish Interfaith Week with a prayer and meditation vigil on Sunday, the 31st of October in George Square, the day before COP26 starts. At the vigil, we'll be inviting people from diverse traditions to pray or hold in their thoughts the COP26 negotiators, that they may have the courage and wisdom to work together to make the commitments necessary to safeguard the future of humanity and all life on our planet. The stakes don't get much higher than that. Our intention is to live stream the vigil with an accompanying social media campaign so that people around the world can share their prayers for the COP and feel that they're with us in Glasgow, wherever they may be in the world. So a crucial date for the diary is 31st of October. We'll hopefully see you there, be it virtually or in person. But back to tonight. Our hope is that you'll leave this event with a greater understanding of COP26 and why it matters so much, inspired to get involved, and with plenty of ideas about how you can do that. Come November, the eyes of the world will be on Glasgow and on Scotland. Let's show them what passionate interfaith climate action looks like. Thank you.
So, on to our next bit of the event. We are going to be hearing tonight from 3 inspiring speakers. And thank you, Rose, for your contribution and your welcome. In fact, this event is really key in ahead of the COP26. And indeed, as you said, Rose, faith communities have a lot to bring and to say. And in 2014, Christiana Figueres, the former executive secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, said that it is time for faith groups and religious institutions to find their voice and set their moral compass on one of the great humanitarian issues of our time. So tonight, to make our task and our actions more robust, we have, as I said, 3 inspiring speakers who are going to talk to us about the COP. So on to our first speaker. I think he is here. I just want to check. Rae, are you with us? Rae is joining us all the way from Fiji, from the Pacific. So I'm just going to do an introduction, Rae. Thank you for joining us so early in the morning. I believe it's about 5:30 a.m. your time. And I'm grateful so far that the connectivity is on our side. So Rae is of Banaban and Kiribati origins. He was raised and educated in Fiji throughout his childhood years. Like nearly everyone else, his grandparents were forced to relocate to Rabi in Fiji from Kiribati in 1945 because the British mined it so badly and extensively for phosphate that they could not live there anymore. His environmental and social justice work is linked to the histories of his people and the extent of environmental degradation caused by mining that have made their sacred land uninhabitable. Rae is a passionate community and youth worker, and he runs his own consultancy firm supporting the Kiribati and Banaban civil society organizations in areas of good governance and social work. So, Kona Mauri Rae, how are you? Thank you for joining us, and over to you now.
Kona Mauri, and good morning, everyone. It is an honor and pleasure to be joining you from Rambi Island, where I'm at the moment. This morning, I wanted to talk about the Banaban people and climate change. So please bear with me. My internet is not stable from where I'm at right now, but the Banaban people are an indigenous group of people that was displaced in 1945 from Kiribati, 2,000 kilometers north of Fiji, because of extensive phosphate mining. So I'll share some of the stories of our faith-based groups and communities recently with the drought that happened on Banaban, our homeland in Kiribati, and what our faith-based organizations and communities did to mobilize as a community, to pray for the rain and to come together in faith, to ask, and to pray together as a community for rain. So I'm just going to ask if we can move on to the next slide. Yes, so I started climate work, advocacy, and being involved as a community mobilizer back in 2011. In 2015, I was fortunate to be part of the Kiribati Climate Action Network that attended the COP21. And the COP experience was, COP21, that was the first ever COP meeting that I've attended. And I think from the 2 weeks, the experiences was really overwhelming, and it was a good learning curve for most of our Pacific delegations that were in Paris. So I come from a very big family, an extended family, both from my paternal and maternal sides, and our families are all scattered around in Kiribati, Fiji, and Nauru, because of the relocation that we experienced back to the 1945. So at the moment, I'm on Rambi Island, which is the Banaban's second home in Fiji, and this is where majority of the Banaban people are located right now. The Banabans are the indigenous people of Ocean Island. And Ocean Island was one of the island that was discovered, and that's when they started mining the island for about 80 years until it was completely destroyed, and then people were moved on an island that they bought from the phosphate loyalties, and Banaban was annexed to be part of the Kiribati Islands, and most of the Banabans were relocated to Rambi in Fiji, to Kusai, and other parts of the Federated States of Micronesia, including Nauru. But the people were a distinct group of people, but because of the colonization as well as the migrations that happened from the Kiribati Islands, intermarriage became a thing, and the Banabans were the Banaban. We eventually lost our language because of the migrations, And now the Banabans, they are using the Kiribati language as a way to communicate with one another. And yes, so I'll just move on to the next slide. And then in 1885, on 4th of August, the arrival of Christianity on Banaban, began from the visit made by Reverend Walkup and Kinta from the American Board of Commissions for Foreign Mission. And, Christianity played a very important role in the maintenance of our cultures and traditions, as well as our people as a united community. So you'll see on the slideshow, there was a group of people, standing beside the tent where the Banabans that that were relocated to Rambi, and having proper shelters when they come onto the island, and just they were told that everything was going to be prepared for them when they arrive on Fiji, but nothing happened. So a lot of mistreatment took place as a result, and eventually most of our elders and young ones lost their lives because of the brutal living conditions that they face. And Kiribati and Fiji are two separate countries with separate weather conditions. So it was a bit colder, a lot of cyclones, and the Banabans, our people, our ancestors, came at a very critical time where it was cyclone season, hurricane season. So, they had to learn how to live and adapt to the new environment. In Fiji. And so by two later governments, which is the Chapter 9, the Banabans in Kiribati, and the Banaban Settlement Act in Fiji. So this is two separate countries, separated by about 2,000 kilometers. And I think the two different countries also have two different conditions of, it's just two different environments, because Kiribati and Fiji are just, it's nothing, the weather conditions are different, but, the only reason why our people were moved was because of phosphate mining. And, we always talk about our experiences with this forced relocation, because our ancestors and our people were actually the first, indigenous people of the Pacific Islands that were relocated because of colonization, because of capitalism and the greed for power through, the phosphate mining, and now the stories that we've lived in for over 70 years now in Fiji. We are using these stories to shape what we would like the climate-induced migrants to learn from our experiences, to say that there is a commonality between forced relocation because of phosphate mining and climate change, because these are the very same countries that are destroying, and are contributing to carbon emissions were the very same countries that also were responsible for phosphate mining. Climate change on Banaban. So when the British Phosphate Company stopped mining the island, they moved out, after about 80 years of mining, and rehabilitation was not done, and so they left the island so exhausted and devastated. And actually everything was destroyed. In February of this year, we had a very bad drought that hit Banaban. And drought has been a problem on Banaban for all the years, way back. And we hear stories of, Banaban facing drought and people having to sort water from the only cave that they have on the island. So what happened was our elders on Banaban reached out, and we mobilized civil societies to advocate for, some of the immediate solutions as well as a long-term solution for the water crisis. But drought has been a direct impact of climate change, because we've lately, Banaban has experienced prolonged droughts. Like normally we would have, rainy seasons and dry seasons, but recently there has been like a 3 months, and recently we also had a 1 year period without rain. So this has been really extreme because of the devastated island, and because most of the rainwater tanks on the island that was put up and that was erected by, the British Phosphate Company and other partners that were involved in the mining, because everything was destroyed. Our people could not store water, and because the island is also full of asbestos, that's not good for the health. So what happened is that we all mobilized as a community to come together to advocate for the water crisis on Banaban, and water was sent out to the island. But just as a power of prayer and as a power of community of faith-based organizations and groups, we declared March the 17th as a day of prayer, and people came together virtually. In the end, because I just returned from Egypt, said, let's declare today as a day of prayer. And so we prayed and prayed and prayed. And the morning of the 17th of March, we received rain on Banaban before the vessel, made way to berth at the wharf with the supplies of water. And that was an example of, the strong belief of our communities that God is always has been with us since it arrived on Banaban in 1885. And until today, our people always, believe that the only reason why we survived so many events of the past, through forced relocation, the droughts and everything that's happening, it has always been God that's always helping us. And you can find the link if you type on the Banaban water crisis on Google. You can find, so I'm just gonna move to the next slide. So so today, the Banabans are both, in Fiji, in Kiribati, you know, the story of the survival through forced relocation is something that we should use as a lesson learned to most of these UN talks on human mobilities. So I'll leave the slideshow because the final, if we go to the final slide, there are some recommendations for the COP. So that include the stronger policies and legislation for protection of migrants using lesson learned from communities who have already experienced displacement and not from approximation or projections. A clear definition of climate-induced migrant as opposed to climate refugee. And then the last one is a clear pathway for migrants who choose to return home, because as climate migrants from the Pacific, they would always want to return home. So I leave you guys with this, and I thank you so much for the time this morning.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Rae. Ko rabua Rae, as you say in your language. And I'm really pleased that the connectivity was good enough for you to do your presentation. And as most of you will know, internet connectivity is a massive issue, and which can prevent us from being inclusive as much as we would like to be. And it's going to be a significant issue for COP as well, generally in terms of including the global south and how difficult it can be for them for the global south to have the same level of internet and quality of internet access. So thank you, Rae, again for this moving presentation and account of your people. So I'm now going to introduce our next speaker. Maria Zafar is a campaigns and public affairs coordinator for Islamic Relief. Islamic Relief is an international AIDS agency that provides humanitarian relief and development programs in over 40 countries, serving communities in need. And Maria's area of focus is campaigning on climate and gender justice, working closely with the Climate Coalition and Faith for the Climate Network. So welcome, Maria, and thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm Maria, and I'll just get straight into it, I guess. The COP26 event is a global United Nations summit about climate change and how countries are coming together to tackle it. COP26 presents a crucial opportunity to reflect on what has been achieved in the last 5 years since the Paris Agreement. It will also be the first time nations will be convening since America's departure and subsequent return to the Paris Agreement. And COP26 will be an amazing opportunity for the UK hosting a massive conference just like this. Now, faith and climate justice go hand in hand. And if you look across most, if not all religions, you see the same messaging of custodianship and taking care of the earth and living in harmony with the earth. And this is something that speaks to me on a personal level, coming from the Muslim faith tradition. And there is a few verses that I'd like to share with you today to that sort of exemplify that. And as people of faith, you know, faith is a way of life. And how beautiful is it that from our respective faiths, we can gain lessons and teachings of how to live in harmony with the earth. So the first sort of lesson I would like to sort of share with you is the metaphor of a bee, and to sort of be more like a bee. And it goes, be like the honeybee, anything it eats is clean, anything it drops is sweet, and the branch it sits upon does not break. And this is by Imam Ali. And it sort of exemplifies how humans should sort of live and reside on the earth. And certainly in relation to our place on the earth and what we can give to it and what we gain from it. And it's something that we need to keep on the forefront of our minds. Globally, 84% of the world's population has a religion. And that is massive, that is so significant. And if we together collectively make climate consciousness and climate action a main priority for ourselves, there is so much we can do by speaking to our faith leaders, our priests, our imams, the younger generation up and coming, learning about scripture and their religions, about what it means to be a person of faith and also being climate conscious and sort of taking that responsibility. So essentially, people of faith should really be on the forefront of climate action. And that's something, and a message that we continually speak about in Islamic Relief, and something that we like to promote as well through our events and our sort of partnerships. So essentially, I think one thing that's really important to remember is that, you know, climate change does have a human cost. And there are people across the world that are sort of facing the forefront and the brunt of the climate crisis. You know, time and time after again, we're seeing droughts, we're seeing flooding, we're seeing cyclones. And essentially, as people of faith, when we sort of pray and believing in hope, we need to also bear in mind our brothers and sisters, our global families, that essentially need our prayers and are facing that sort of brunt of the climate crisis. And sort of moving on to the next sort of thing that I wanted to touch upon on the urgency and the need for people of faith to take greater action. I wanted to touch upon another hadith, sort of something that comes from the Muslim faith tradition, again, is that even if it's the day of resurrection and you have a palm shoot and you have a seed, plant it. And that's the level of urgency that we're talking about. That's the level that we should be as people of faith and none, coming together and uniting and saying, actually, this is something that we can all do from our respective faiths. And this is how we're going to take a collective action and come together to promote a message, which is, in essence, celebrating the gift of the earth and giving back to the earth. Often we see many societies which are very exploitative of the earth, you know, take advantage, but this is our temporary home, and we should really be nurturing every relationship, however small or large, that we have with the earth. And I guess I wanted to sort of finish off with the idea that as people of faith, we believe in hope, we believe in prayer. And I guess whenever we sit down or we're being mindful and we're in conversation with our Creator, we should really bear in mind the health of the earth, you know, the health of animals, the health of the ecosystem, and just generally incorporate that into any sermon that we have, any khutbah that we have in the mosque, or any teaching that we're preaching. And there is so much power in conversation too. So any conversations that you're having in your church or in your synagogue, or every time you sit around the dinner table, it's important that you remember the sort of earth and the people that are facing the brunt of the climate crisis, because let's face it, they're not the larger contributors. It's us here in the West that are the larger contributors of the climate crisis. So that's something else to bear in mind. So in the end, when you're taking climate action, remember that it's for firstly your future, secondly your global families, and finally for your faith. Because for many of us, being climate conscious and taking climate action is a form of worship, and there is nothing more beautiful than that. And I'd like to end it with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you very much for your contribution, reminding us that climate action is an act of worship, but also an act of service to the earth, to humanity, to all of us. So thank you very much. Thank you for your input. We're running a bit late, so I'm going to, without any further ado, introduce us to our last speaker, Kat Jones. So Kat works for Stop Climate Chaos Scotland, and she manages their work related to COP26, especially in the areas of how we host global society to Glasgow and provide what they need in terms of accommodation, facilities, and a welcome for them, and how we use COP26 as a way of building the climate movement in Scotland. Stop Climate Chaos is a coalition of over 60 civil society groups from environmental NGOs and development organizations to trade unions, faith groups, and community and student groups. So over to you, Kat, for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and thank you so much to the other speakers. It's been really great to listen to those, and I wanted to say specifically about Rae's talk there that you know, he really powerfully put across the concepts of climate justice that I think a lot of the faith organisations have in common, in terms of that's the way, the place we're coming from in terms of a climate justice approach. And also hopefully that some of this will ring with that experience he had at COP, where he said he found it quite an intense, I can't quite remember the exact word he used, I think I noted it down, like an overwhelming experience to be there. And I found it very overwhelming when I was at COP myself in Madrid. So that's kind of formed some of the planning that we've been making in Scotland for COP. I'm just going to share my screen and give you a bit of a sort of rundown. Now, this is going to be a very practical kind of talk. So it's really about what practically can faith organisations and faith groups get involved in, and it's probably aimed more at Scottish-based groups than others, but I hope that other people will get something out of this, seeing the kind of things that we're organising. So to get started on that sort of view of COP as a place where global civil society comes, and it's incredibly important to have their voices heard. What we're doing in Scotland, because we know the place well, you know, I've lived in Glasgow now for 25 years, even though I don't sound very Glaswegian, but I've got a great love for the city and how welcoming it is, how open it is. You know, I've always felt very welcomed myself. If you stop in the town centre with a map, you'll only be there 5 seconds before someone's come and told you not just where you want to go, but all the other places you ought to be going that you hadn't thought you'd want to visit. And you know, I want people coming to Glasgow to feel that sense of welcome, and specifically because November can be a horrifically unpleasant weather conditions in Glasgow. So it's very cold, it's very dark, and I'd like people to feel a warmth of welcome and a light from all the communities who are opening their arms to welcome people to COP26, so that those people that arrived overwhelmed with all of the things that are happening and the big stakes that are going to be there. You know, they're going into this conference where the stakes are huge. We've really got a planet to save, and we want people to feel they're able to do their job. So basically what we're doing in Scotland is, how do we help people do their jobs well? How do we welcome them? And secondly, how do we build the climate movement right across society? So not just the usual suspects in climate. And this is why faith is really important, because as Maria said, 86% of people in the world, or whatever the figure was, have a faith. And so if you can kind of engage faith communities in a really in-depth way, you can engage almost the whole planet in this as an issue. So these kind of things are really important, but we're also reaching out to kind of other groups like disability groups, poverty groups, and all sorts of groups right across Scotland to kind of join with us. So I've got some sort of quick priorities. We want the warmth of the welcome, as I said. We really want to raise up those voices of those most affected by the climate emergency, and highlight inequalities and things. So even in our own city, to look at those inequalities that we have in our own city, and more vulnerability of people who are with disabilities, or with who are in poverty and things like that. So we want to also link local activists with international activists. And we feel that events like this are already starting us on that journey, linking people across the world. And I think it's going to be very exciting, even if COP goes ahead a bit smaller than normal, but what we can achieve with that. So I'm going to direct you to this website as just a little overview, which is how to get involved. And I'm going to be speaking through all of these, and I will put a little note up of it, so you can click on it and have a look later and get involved. But there's some really great things that specifically faith communities, I think, will be interested in taking part in. The first is events. I mean, you've got your Interfaith Week that's happening during COP itself, but if there's events happening before COP, we'd really encourage you to upload them onto our Climate Fringe website. In 18th to 26th of September in Scotland, we are doing a concentration on events, Climate Fringe Week. And the idea is to get as many events as possible out there, and all different types, because that's a week when world leaders are meeting in New York, and it's a perfect time to do some kind of influencing ahead of COP. So if we can all over Scotland get events happening, perhaps lobbying MSPs or MPs, and also activities within our communities, it can link into things that are happening worldwide, including Great Big Green Week, which for those of you who are in England, Wales, Northern Ireland, is what you can get involved in those places, and we're working together on doing something. The second thing that I think faith communities will be incredibly interested in is this idea of hosting people in your homes. So as you heard from Rae, an overwhelming experience at COP, I felt the same. I was in a hotel, but I didn't see really anybody who I knew. I was just in my hotel, and then I went by underground to the event and back. And I missed my family dreadfully, and I don't normally get homesick, but I did because it was in that very isolating place and it's very intense work. So I thought, you know, we've spoken to people in previous COPs who've done this and suggested this is a fantastic thing to do. And so this seems like the ideal situation. We created a website, which is essentially works like Airbnb. So you can sign up and you can charge a small amount to cover your costs, or you can make it free if that's what you want. And you can get involved. So it's a really good exchange. So you can meet a climate activist, a climate campaigner, someone who's a COP delegate, and you can also give them your hospitality. And we really hope that people who are coming from all over the world with all the different faiths have a home where they can go with someone who shares a faith, if that's what they're looking for, or has a different faith, if they're looking for kind of more of a cultural exchange. So I think it's going to be fantastic. Thirdly, volunteering. So we've got these civil society hubs set up. So these are going to have facilities for civil society. We're going to have an arts hub, which will have bookable space for artivists and artists to make things and to rehearse. For many of the things that happen, the interventions are artistic because, of course, they have to have that visual and auditory element that really captures the attention. So we'll have a lot of artists in there. We've got an event space at Adelaide's, and Kinning Park Complex will have a lot of sort of meeting space and things like that you can book. So we'll be looking for volunteers. We're not going out for that until June, but keep a lookout for it, because we'd love to have as many volunteers from across communities as possible in order for us to sort of serve the needs of the very diverse community that we hope will be coming to COP, COVID allowing, obviously. This is something that communities can get involved in. So if you have a local hall, village hall, church hall, place of worship with a hall attached, I've said within 1 hour of Glasgow, but it'd be better if it was within Glasgow, then we can offer it up as space for hot desks, for activists, or other sort of things like event space if they want to do events or press conferences, or if they want it for meetings, strategy meetings and things like that. So that's all involved. You can see how to get in touch with that. And then the Glasgow Green Map. This is fantastic for anyone who really loves their community in Glasgow, and I know everybody does. They want to put up all the things that matter to them. So when people come to COP, helping them find their way around to locally owned businesses, community gardens, community-owned businesses and social enterprises, to sort of give people a real sense of Glasgow that's away from perhaps the big brand names like Starbucks or whatever. Where do you go to get a really good local coffee run by a local family or something like that? So get involved in that, put up your local stuff. This is a list of all the different organisations that have stepped up to support our proposal for a wellbeing, creative dialogue and sanctuary space at COP. And of course, Interfaith Scotland and Interfaith Glasgow are on there. And we're still waiting to hear about this, but we've done a lot of lobbying of the UK government because we felt that there needed to be at COP in the Blue Zone a space for people to have quiet and a space for people to have chaplaincy. So and also other sort of services and creative dialogue as well. So we've got this sort of proposal in, fingers crossed that they come back to us. And if they do, there'll be a lot of opportunities for getting involved in that. So that's the end of what I've got to say. I will post this website up on the chat, and I really hope that people will get involved. Perhaps send a message to me in the chat if you're interested, and I'll put my email address up there so people can get in touch. Thank you.
Amazing, that's great. Thank you, Kat, for letting letting us know how we can get involved in the COP. And please don't worry about copying and pasting all the info in the chat. We'll be sending out an email to all those of you who have registered for the event with the information that's in the chat. So we're next going to hear from Maureen Siren, Director of Interfaith Glasgow, of Interfaith Scotland even, sorry. So over to you, Maureen, without any further ado. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Satya. And please don't worry. I think sometimes holding such a complex event is really a challenge. So hi, my name's Maureen Siren and I'm Director of Interfaith Scotland. And good evening, everyone. Absolutely lovely to be with you. So it's a great pleasure to be here with all of you to explore what we can do together for the planet. And can I also say that working with Interfaith Glasgow on the event tonight has been a joy, as has listening to the speakers so far. What's so inspiring in Scotland is our ability as faith communities and interfaith organisations to come together to address the critical issues of our time. And no one can deny that the climate crisis is not just the critical issue of our time, but actually is a critical issue of all time. Interfaith Scotland decided very early on this year that it would be our year of climate action, and we've enjoyed incredible support at the local, national and international level. And this support has come from faith communities and interfaith organisations, from religious leaders and from government. It's come from climate and environmental organisations and from individuals who are deeply concerned by the crisis that we all face. This collaborative action is the key not only to our successful engagement at COP26, but also, I think, to our survival as a species. We cannot think if one nation or people get the environmental actions right, that we'll have somehow done our bit for the planet. What we need is all nations and all peoples to commit to transformative action at all levels of society, in our individual and our collective lives. Faith communities in Scotland have already been rising to the challenge of committing to transformative action, and this is captured beautifully in the statement of commitment that was mentioned briefly by Rose and written collaboratively by the Scottish Religious Leaders Forum. This statement is currently being explored along with the Lambeth Declaration and it to be crafted to a multi-faith declaration for COP26. Now, Jill's going to put a link to that statement into the chat so that you can all have a look at it when you have a moment. So what sort of powerful interfaith voice can we have at COP26? And is it enough to have a voice just at COP? Beyond COP, will our voices continue to be heard? And what needs to be in place for this to happen? So I'm hoping that all the action that's taken to galvanise us for COP will continue and will continue to work on this critical crisis together. Rose has mentioned Scottish Interfaith Week 2021, which is the same theme as this event and the same theme as COP, Together for Our Planet. This is an opportunity for faith communities, local interfaith groups, community organisations, climate-based organisations and others from across Scotland to host interfaith or community events during COP26, which is why we decided to bring Interfaith Week forward by a couple of weeks so that the two things coincided. The exciting launch event for Scottish Interfaith Week has already been beautifully described by Rose, and we're delighted to be co-hosting the launch with Interfaith Glasgow. The event page of Scottish Interfaith Week website is actually now live, so Jill will post a link to the chat so you can plan your event and immediately upload it onto the Scottish Interfaith Week website. And you can also do exactly the same on the Climate Fringe website. So if you're holding an event, just have a double whammy and upload to both, which I think is just great. Interfaith Scotland and Interfaith Glasgow have been privileged to have almost weekly meetings with the International Interfaith Liaison Committee to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. And we have held and will be continuing to hold internationally focused webinars on the crisis. The events are of course open to everyone and can be a fantastic way of enhancing our knowledge and perspective of the crisis from a diverse, international and multi-faith perspective. But let not the international engagement be a distraction. Let it be an enhancement of what we're doing and will be doing at the Scottish and Glasgow level. Kat has mentioned homestays, faith spaces, volunteering, the potential of the wellbeing space. And we at Interfaith Scotland and Interfaith Glasgow have mentioned Scottish Interfaith Week and holding events during COP. And in addition to all of this, we've created, with the help of others, a faith-based document that shares information, resources, and links that we know you will find helpful. So please, you can see the link in the chat, and again, Satya will be sending that out to all of the participants. And you'll be hearing from Jonathan about Interfaith Pilgrimage that is being planned. and indeed it is one of many. So my heart is uplifted by the enthusiastic engagement of the faith communities and interfaith groups in Scotland. And it's important to stress that although Interfaith Scotland, Interfaith Glasgow, and also Edinburgh Interfaith Association are creating platforms for interfaith engagement on COP26, the faith communities themselves are getting the message out. And this is vital and at the heart of community engagement. So I want to just give a call out to Eco Congregation Scotland, the Glasgow Churches Together and their appointment of a climate ambassador, Christian Aid and Tear Fund, SCIA, the Catholic Commission for Justice and Peace, and the Catholic Bishops in Scotland's Office for Creation, the Scottish Jewish Community Climate Network, EcoSeek Scotland, the Baha'i Climate Crisis Task Force Glasgow, the Buddhists, the Hindus, the Muslims, the pagan organisations, and all that they are doing and all the activities that are taking place. And on our linked resource, you will see so many faith-based organisations nationally and internationally that I know, like me, you will be overwhelmed and just grateful for the incredible amount of work that is being done across the globe to say, enough is enough. We need transformative action. In fact, the International Interfaith Liaison Committee, who have attended COP, every single COP since its inception, have stated time and again to us that they have never seen, experienced, or witnessed anything like the engagement, the planning, the preparation, and commitment that is coming from the faith communities and interfaith organisations in Scotland. So thank you. Let's do it. Let's make our voices loud and clear. We are calling ourselves and all of humanity to account. So let it really count. Let there be our voices and, more importantly, our collaborative actions. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Maureen. Let's do it indeed. Thank you for the call out to all the faith communities. And now we have Jonathan Baxter to talk to us about the pilgrimage that he's organising. Jonathan, welcome and thank you.
Hello, thank you. Good to be here. Wonderful to hear the speakers. So I've been asked to say something briefly about the pilgrimage for COP26. And I will be brief, and it's I'll just be quite practical. So I'll just describe it really, what we're up to. And just to say, it's what I'm really saying is anybody who would like to get involved, then please send me an email. Please join the conversation. So in a nutshell, we're essentially walking a group, a broad group of, I should say, interfaith, local community and arts organisations. And I think that's quite important that we're blending quite large arts organisations with an interfaith conversation. We'll be walking from Dunbar to Glasgow in the 2 weeks run up to COP. So from the 18th of October to the 31st. So we're starting in Dunbar. We're walking two well-established routes. We're walking the John Muir Way, and then we're joining St Ninian's Way into Glasgow. And essentially what we're doing is we're actually, I suppose in a very simple sense, we are trying to reflect on what's being discussed, explored and heard into speech at Glasgow, but we're doing that in a way that doesn't make, I suppose, heavy demands. In the spirit of a pilgrimage, we don't actually know what will unfold. Obviously, in our hearts, we are walking with a great awareness of the climate and ecological crisis. But as Rae mentioned, whether COP26 actually delivers on what we really need to address either the climate or the ecological crisis is something we'll have to wait and see. So in a sense, we're walking together in a spirit of resilience to really what comes after COP26. So irrespective of what happens at COP26, we are about galvanizing, bringing people together, establishing those relationships, and we keep on walking. We're walking to, 2030, where in Edinburgh in particular has made a very strong commitment, for example, to be net zero carbon in its operations. So we really are walking through COP26 to 2030 to fulfill this this vision that we have collectively, whether or not the politicians help us in that. So in a really practical sense, as I say, we're walking from Dunbar to Glasgow. Lots of people will be interested in the pilgrimage, but not necessarily want to walk in October. So there are going to be elements of which people can sign up to be involved, a kind of bell of mindfulness, if you like, sign up each day to learn something about the walk and to share something about their story as well. But for those who are actually walking, we're walking through, let me put it in a simple sense, we're walking through pre-industrial, industrial and post-industrial landscapes and community. So we're really learning from the landscape, the places that we're walking through, and we're also going to be learning from communities en route. So that's really what we're doing. And perhaps of importance for those in this context, in the interfaith context, we're working with a deep time model. So we're thinking about the cosmos. We're thinking about those previous extinction, crisis that we've had before, and how that actually reframes our current crisis and the resilience we need to bear around that, and how faith communities have an intrinsic, such a valuable story to tell around their creation narratives. Now, very different creation narratives actually, but how we can start working with those narratives and maybe showing some of that within a contemporary art form. For example, we're working with Scottish Dance Theatre. So how do these narratives come to bear within other secular art contexts? So that's part of what we're doing. I could say a lot more, but I'll simply say this. We are walking from Dunbar to Glasgow. There are tributaries, other walkers. Some of you will know of other pilgrimages happening. Some of them will be joining us in Edinburgh, and then we'll be going on to Glasgow. Of particular importance for interfaith communities will be the events in, if you like, way stations in a traditional pilgrimage language in Edinburgh and Glasgow. So Dunbar is a more simple walk into Edinburgh, but then in Edinburgh, we'll actually have an interfaith pilgrimage internally within Edinburgh, visiting different faith communities, learning something of their story. And we'll also be looking at the geology of the city. So we'll actually be looking at that deep time narrative by looking at the geology. That's in Edinburgh. And then when we come into Glasgow, again, we'll be working with different faith communities to hold that pilgrimage and learn from, again, different communities within Glasgow itself and from visitors to Glasgow who will be speaking towards some of the concerns at COP26. So if you'd like to get involved, we'd love to hear from you. Information will be in the chat. Thank you very much. Great,
thank you very much. So next, I think we really need to press on and move on to the next bit of the event. We have a couple more people actually that we'd like to hear from. Sapna, you just spoke to us, and hopefully Shannon Shah from Faith with the Climate. So this is for us to know, what other opportunities there are locally in terms of what actions that we can take, and Sapna can tell us a bit more briefly in a few minutes, a couple of minutes. Thank you, Sapna.
Thank you, Satya, and thank you very much for inviting me to speak for a couple of minutes. I wanted to tell you about a project that I've initiated called Dear Green Pledge. I recognise a couple of names from here of people that have signed up to it. So the thinking behind Dear Green Pledge was that there's, I've heard it again and again, that the most important thing that we can do about the climate crisis is to talk about it and to keep talking about it and to talk to people we know and really keep that conversation alive. And it's a very much a live conversation in certain activist circles. But I was thinking, how do we kind of reach out to, I guess, people that aren't necessarily involved in activism and give them a sort of a system of support and gentle accountability to have these conversations, to get involved in these conversations. So Dear Green Pledge is aimed at groups of people, so family groups, groups of friends, faith groups, sports clubs, youth groups, any kind of group. And what we're asking people to do is to pledge, to make a commitment to have a conversation about climate issues once a month between now and the COP, and hopefully beyond that. Hopefully that'll just become part of people's routine and they'll just continue. So what happens is you go to the little WordPress site and you make your pledge, and then once a month we send out conversation starters to help people kind of get going with their conversations. Maybe people already have things that they want to speak about, but maybe they don't, and maybe it's helpful for some people to have these conversation starters. So there might be links to videos, links to articles. It's aimed at any age group, I guess over 8 years old. It's not really targeted at like young children, but there's something there for different ages. And the thinking was that if people are talking within their communities, talking to people that they know and they trust, then the conversations can be really open, really honest. It could also be a place, because this is such a difficult issue to talk about, it's so overwhelming, that if you're talking with people that you know and that you trust, there can be some support. So the way it works is you sign up and you get your prompts every month, and then there's also opportunity to send in some feedback from your conversations. And then that gets compiled into blog posts so that you can see what other people have been talking about. And in a way, it's a very small action. You're going to be meeting with these people anyway, and you're just having a small conversation. But in another way, it's quite a big thing, because it's really keeping the conversation alive and really addressing what's important to people. So I'll put a link in the chat to the WordPress site and people can have a look at it.
Brilliant, thank you. It's a great initiative. You're getting some really positive comments in the chat there. And so Shannon Shah from Faith for the Climate, in a few words, if you'd like to talk about your manifestation in the next month. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Satya, and thank you every speaker tonight. Just in the interest of time, I just like to say how inspiring and wonderful all of you were, and the conversations in the chat. I think a sense that I'm getting is that we're all excited to be together on this journey, but there's also maybe a feeling of being overwhelmed because there's quite a lot going on already. And there's been quite a few events like tonight's event, which is fantastic. But there was, from the ground up by the COP26 coalition a few weeks ago, there was a faith sort of panel there as well. And I'm the director of Faith for the Climate, which is based in London. And we are a national interfaith organization that focuses on climate action. And we had our own webinar on our work on COP this year. So we convene a group called Make COP Count. And you can see our website there, which we've just set up. And some of the people here tonight are on this group as well. So Maria Zafar, who spoke really eloquently from Islamic Relief UK, is an active member of Faith for the Climate and Make COP Count. So we were thinking that one way of bringing us together, if you've been on this journey and you're excited and you want to take the next step, whatever that next step is, and want to meet other people to do this with together, and just make new friends, feel a sense of community leading up to COP. We are organizing a get-together on the 1st of June called Gearing Up to Glasgow. It's going to be messy. There's no panel discussions. It's just come and meet people. Tell us what you're interested in. We will create breakout rooms based on what you're interested in to do with COP. And it's just a chance to get together, get inspired, and share what we're doing with each other, and maybe to align and amplify what we're doing. If someone's making the same action in Dunbar, another one in Sheffield, and another one in Cornwall, maybe that's a time to pull your ideas together and think, how can you amplify each other's actions? So please do register for that. And just finally, I mentioned the webinar that we did on our work on COP. I'll just put that in the chat as well. And as I said, we are Faith for the Climate. We are a national interfaith organization focused on climate action. You can find out about all our activities and resources by subscribing to our e-news. I've just put the link in the chat, and you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook. And I've also put my email in there. So if you have any other questions, please get in touch with me. This has been really fantastic tonight. I'm so glad to be here and to hear about all the wonderful work everyone is doing. So thank you so much. Thank you so much to Interfaith Scotland, Interfaith Glasgow, and the COP26 coalition. And that's me for now.
Thank you very much, Shannon. Thank you for your contribution. And next we have Maureen Siren back for our closing remark before we finish the event. So Maureen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Satya. It has been really an inspirational event, actually, and I think I knew it would be. I knew that when we all came together and we saw all these wonderful people, and we heard about all the different things that are happening locally, regionally, nationally, internationally, that how can we not be excited? But I think there's also, I'm so glad that Shannon said that sometimes we can feel overwhelmed. And you know, the issues seem so big and so huge that we do wonder if our little small voice can make a difference. But when you come to a space like this and think, actually, it's not a little small voice anymore. You know, we have all these friends, all these activists, all these people, and this is tripled and quadrupled, and you know, so it goes on. It's expanding, and I really sincerely feel that I think the governments cannot now ignore us, you know, that ignore faith-based organisations and interfaith groups and individuals and climate organisations that have been working so hard. So I just want to say thank you. I think Rae, having you all the way from Fiji gave us a whole different feel to the organisation. I want to just say thank you so very much for coming, and to thank Maria and Kat and Jonathan, you know, for all your presentations, Satya for your great and patient secretarial work, Katie as well for your technical support. I want to say to the staff and the volunteers and the friends of Interfaith Glasgow and Interfaith Scotland, thank you so much for all that you've done tonight, from facilitating to techie support to putting things into the chat to just holding this space. And we often talk in interfaith dialogue circles about creating a safe space. And I think there is something very powerful about all of us being together. And actually, I've just seen a message from Louisa in Edinburgh. And Louisa, when I was mentioning faith communities and all that's been done, it's been wonderful to have Brahma Kumaris hold the international space with the International Liaison Committee. So it's really nice to see Louisa here from Edinburgh as well. There's, you know, I suppose now it'll be collating all these wonderful suggestions that you've made. It will be thinking about what's the next steps, what are we going to do now, and how are we going to take the small action that we committed to tonight, but how are we going to build on all the relationships that have been built tonight and really work so hard to make COP count. I want to say thank you to our partners who Interfaith Glasgow, for the tremendous work they've done really to make this happen, to the staff team from Interfaith Scotland who are also here, and thank you. And to the faith communities and all of you for turning up, for being here, and for feeling this heart and soul connection to this beautiful world that we all inhabit. And you know, it's coming from all of you from a place of such goodwill. It's not about promoting one faith or another faith. It's about promoting the human race, our interconnectedness with all of this beautiful planet, and our total and absolute commitment to trying to make a difference and to save. Sounds like super people that we're going to save the planet, but really feel that there's a possibility that we have to save this planet. So I'm going to pass over to Satya, who's going to say the final words. And I want to say thank you, Satya. I know how much you put into holding this space and making it really special for us.
Thank you very much, Maureen. Thank you, everyone, for being with us tonight. And wanted to take one moment to thank Jumbo Radio, the African Caribbean radio station for Glasgow. I'm just going to put some their details in the chat. Please do follow them and listen to their programs. And also follow us, Interfaith Glasgow and Interfaith Scotland on Facebook.